Good morning, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing great, Richard. Good morning. It's raining down here. We're getting, I think, a new system. And so
hmm
it's a
I
lot of
see
rain.
that.
How is the weather up in Boston?
It's raining here. I think we're getting the previous system. I think we're getting Helene. And I also, on that topic, noticed that there was a new weather model that got released that is actually more powerful than any other weather model that's ever been released and kind of knocked the previous models right out of the water, so to speak,
Yes.
or right out
Yes.
of the sky. I don't know how you would describe that one. But it looks like these models are getting really, really good, surprisingly good, considering just how complex weather systems are. But these predictive models are actually, you know, getting much more. I think it's because there are more sensors. We'll
Mhm.
talk about this later in the episode, but I know that access to more sensors, access to more refined models as well, where you can separate the training data from the actual predictive data. We'll talk about that as well, but that seems to be a big theme.
It is. It definitely is. And it was a very big week for AI. We had
Mm,
massive new releases from all the big players. I'm talking from Google, from Microsoft, from OpenAI. If you're an AI enthusiast, if you're a company looking to leverage AI technologies, or if you're just an individual following the space, you had a lot to digest this week. So let's dive in. And I'll
hmm
start with the big theme around open AI. And then I'd love to talk about some of the new creative models for creators, video models,
hmm
image models. Then I'd love to talk to you about enterprise adoption, what's happening in the
hmm
enterprise space. And then we want to talk a little bit about some events that are coming up. I'll be in Boston this week, so I'm super excited about that. And we have our first in person event next year. So lots to go through this episode. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, yeah. Let's go. Let's dive
All
in.
right. Awesome. So this week we had a lot of major releases from OpenAI. One, it was their Dev Day. Now, to put this in context, last year their Dev Day was a splashy affair. It was
hmm
promoted in the news. You had every outlet invited, and they had some pretty good releases. I wouldn't say the releases were amazing, but they made a big show of it, and
hmm
everyone was impressed because the models were new. They were excited about what was happening with OpenAI. And this year, nothing. It just kind of flew under the radar. I don't think many people even knew that this week was Dev Day.
hmm
But I argue that the releases that they announced this week were much more important than even last year. More
hmm
importantly, it wasn't that they didn't have announcements to make. This week, they also announced a massive $6.6 billion funding round that now values the
Right.
company at 150 plus billion dollars. They
Yep.
also got a 4 billion line of credit. And they also released Canvas, a brand new user experience to interact and collaborate with AI. And so,
Yeah.
despite all of these big news, nothing was announced that big on Dev Day except developer focused tools. And I think that says a lot in terms of where the company is going, what their priorities are, and how they're going to be moving going forward. So, Richard, I'll let you
So let's.
start. What were your
Yeah.
thoughts on some of the
I want to
releases
dig
this
in. I
week?
want to ask. I've got so many questions for you about this OpenAI stuff. First of all, a lot of people must be asking the question, what are they going to use this much money for? Right.
Yeah.
This essentially between the round of investment that they've raised and the deadline that they've secured, we have approximately $10 billion available. Now, it sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money, but let's talk about the relative costs of actually building and maintaining the AI infrastructure that they are working towards. It's not cheap. So maybe you can give us some insights into where this money is actually going to be going.
It's definitely not cheap. When you think of where OpenAI is, they're on track to lose roughly $5 billion this year. And this is
Mm-hmm.
despite having arguably one of the hottest SaaS products for the last year and a half. Most people are at least trying ChatGPT. A lot of people are already paying for it. The
Mm-hmm.
company is bringing in billions of dollars from enterprises, from businesses that have the team plan, and for individuals that are just paying $20 per month to get access to the model. But
Mm-hmm.
despite this, next year the company is projected to lose even more. They're expected to lose $11 billion. According to reports, it costs OpenAI roughly $700,000 per day just to keep ChatGPT running
$700,000 a day.
a day.
Wow. That is
Like let that
crazy.
just sink in for a second. And so when you think of that just being their maintenance cost, This isn't talking about the $7 billion that they have spent so far just training models. This isn't
Yeah.
talking about the capital investments that they'll have to make when it comes to infrastructure. And this isn't talking about the plans that they have for even larger, more capable models that will require more infrastructure, a lot of energy expenses, right? Like we spoke last week about Microsoft and the new 3 Mile Island nuclear facility
Literally
reopening.
just keeping the lights on is costing a fortune.
Right? Like, and so the reality is this: if you're a provider building frontier models, you're going to need to invest a lot of money. When it comes to the money that was raised, you may think 6.6 is a lot, you may think 10 billion is a lot, but
Yeah.
OpenAI may raise a lot more, maybe even later this year or next year, because the ambitions that they're speaking of in terms of the models that they want to create will require a lot more capital than just $10 billion. So I
Yeah.
think it's
So
still early in terms of how much they're raising and what we should expect.
yeah, so during this episode we're going to dig into a little bit about the customer side of the story, like how are they actually raising money from, client or customer revenues. But it's what's maybe a little concerning here is the disparity between how fast they are moving to build these models and how quickly consumers and customers can actually adopt. So we'll get into a little bit of that later. I do want to talk about Canvas. Canvas is a really interesting addition or change to the workflow.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. I spend quite a lot of time using ChatGPT, for example, to create insights or helpful digging, really kind of like, what I do is I give it a prompt, which I've written separately in some other, maybe it's in a Google Doc or whatever. I transfer that prompt over to ChatGPT. It produces a result. I then transfer that back into Google. I do some more editing. I might, ask some additional questions. And so I'm going back and forth between these two environments. Now, ideally, you wouldn't want to do that. And that's exactly
Mhm.
what Canvas is suggesting. So tell us a little bit more about how workflow is going to change with these additional features that they've added.
I think what OpenAI has done with Canvas is brilliant. So when you think about ChatGPT and why ChatGPT succeeded, a lot of people
Mm,
think it was because of the technology, the AI technology behind it. But the reality is the technology was there, it was improving, and
yep.
ChatGPT wasn't even meant to be a major product. They released it as as a research experiment. But the user interface and the user experience that allowed people to easily interact with AI for the first time, that was the unlock. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
important to recognize the role of design in terms of
Mm,
product development and experience overall. If you're a company and you're building a product or a service, the best thing you can do is to get your designers at the front of that conversation and build human-centered products that are actually solving problems. Because
yeah.
I'll use Canvas as the example here. When you think of what OpenAI has done, they've taken the time to think about how people are using their products. And they have said,
Mm-hmm.
okay, like your use case, we see where a lot of people are using it for writing,
Mm-hmm.
and they're
Yep.
looking to collaborate with the AI. And what is the
Mm,
best UX? What is the best interface for us to allow for this? And I stress this because there are a lot of companies that tend to just follow in the space. They saw OpenAI release a chatbot and they thought, wow, this is the user interface that everything needs to fall under. And we have spoken about this before. You had
mm-hmm.
companies in design starting to build chatbots, and you're thinking, well, why would I use a chatbot to create designs? And you had companies, of course, like Adobe that said, we'll just build the AI tools inside of our existing products. And it worked out brilliantly for them. And I
Yep.
think what you're starting to see here with Canvas, which basically, if you write a prompt to ChatGPT, the model can now intelligently open up a canvas, a blank slate that it
Mm-hmm.
can put its output, but it allows you to edit it just like a Google Doc. And then
Right.
it can edit alongside with you. So rather than restarting everything each time that you're making a prompt, you can select a few words, you can select a paragraph, you can comment specifically on the style. And it's collaborating and working with the AI. It's a very interesting feeling, but it feels so natural when you're working with it. It's like working with a colleague versus working with a machine. And I think
Yep.
this is going to be super popular. Now, the one thing I'll add is this. We saw Notebook LM a couple weeks ago. We brought it up. We lauded Notebook LM, and everyone started to use it, and they got excited over it when we spoke about the audio overviews. And I
Yeah.
stress that Notebook LM was probably the best AI product that Google had released in the Gemini era. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of people are starting to recognize it because, again, the user experience around how you can collaborate with the models and get the
Hmm.
summaries and put your sources, it made sense. Not every AI product needs to be a chatbot. I'll just say that right now. If you're thinking,
Yeah.
I need to put a chatbot in my tool, stop. Think about what it is that your customers are trying to do and think about how intelligence can help to augment that experience. Maybe it's a
Yeah.
chatbot, maybe it's something else.
Yeah. There's actually a design thinking tool or exercise that's really relevant for those people who are trying to embed an AI, enhancement or improvement to their existing workflow or structure within their software. It's called an empathy map. And what an empathy
Mhm.
map does is it starts to ask the question, what is the customer, the user, going to be doing? And you map out all of their senses. What are they seeing? What are they hearing? What are they touching? What are they experiencing? How are they feeling? And by mapping all of these different things,
Love
you
that.
can actually get an idea of what that interaction might look like. So instead of just thinking, oh, it needs to be a conversation with a chatbot, you might say, well, what would the experience look like if it was invisible, but it was also appealing to the senses at the same time? So these kinds of things. This is why it's good to work with a designer. This is why it's good to have a design thinking person on the team to help you work through these exercises and not just like dive into like the shortcut of like, hey, let's build another bot.
And one of the things that we have been seeing a few months ago, Anthropic released Artifacts, and people loved
Mm,
it. It was the first time that one of the frontier models providers were creating what I call generative UIs. So you were able to create
yeah.
a prompt, and the model was able to generate the interface of what it is that you were creating, whether it was a slide deck or a document or even code. You could run the code and see what it could look like. And that was great, but it still needed to restart every time you needed to make an update. So you wanted to make a tweak to the
Mm,
code, it would generate completely new code. And so
yeah.
some people may be comparing Artifacts with Canvas. They're completely different interfaces. They're different ways in which you operate and interact with AI. I think both of
Hmm.
them are necessary. I do think Canvas will ultimately need some sort of previewing feature. However, right now, I'll tell you, spending a couple days working with Canvas, there is no way for me to go back. In fact, the desktop app for ChatGPT does not support Canvas as yet. And I'm back in the browser. And I was a big desktop user of ChatGPT, but now I'm back in the browser because being able to just collaborate in real time with AI, it feels like the future. It feels like how we're going to be working with AI systems, especially AI agents moving forward.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Good distinctions there. Okay, cool.
Okay.
So that's
One
Canvas.
other thing I wanted to bring up,
Mm,
Richard, about OpenAI's week, because I don't want it to get lost. But this was their dev week, and I want to stress that it was arguably the biggest event that everyone was looking forward to since last year because of everything that happened in that announcement. And they had some big releases this week, and it just
mm,
kind of flew under the radar, but for good reason. Why? Because I think OpenAI recognizes that there needs to be a separation between the tooling and the services that they provide to developers and to enterprises and to businesses to build products, and the consumer side of OpenAI that releases a ChatGPT interface in a canvas
mm-hmm,
for
mm-hmm,
consumers to use. And I think they're
mm-hmm,
being deliberate in separating both. At DevDay this year, they released their new real-time API, which if you have used the new advanced conversation mode in ChatGPT, where you can just kind of talk to the model, it responds in a very natural, human-like way. You
mm-hmm,
can now build that capability into any product or tool that you have. It
mm-hmm,
is it is wild when you see the examples, when you start to think of what interacting with devices and software will look like in the future. A lot of changes coming, and I couldn't be more excited. And so that is now available to developers. You now have the ability to fine tune the models. They call it model distillation, and I shouldn't even say fine tune. You have the
mm-hmm.
ability to take a larger, more powerful model to train a smaller, more refined model. And this
Yeah.
is great because now you can have specialization and smaller models that are very powerful compared to using the larger models. And so it's going to be a new paradigm for companies that are looking to get specific capabilities out of a model. Because yes, you can have a massive model that's trained on all the internet data, but maybe that's not valuable to you. Maybe you need financial data. Maybe you need a very specific data set that does one thing really well. And model distillation is going to allow for that. They also brought on things like prompt caching. So if there's a certain amount of content that you need to provide to the model each time you're sending over a prompt, maybe it's your data set of code, maybe it's your standard operating procedures for your company. No, you won't be charged each time because it can cache
Mm.
that and store it. And so some really great advancements that were announced that maybe weren't as flashy as the canvas or the fundraising, but a blockbuster week for OpenAI. Hats off to them. They're doing great.
That's actually a good connection to one of the things I do want to talk about today, and that is why do we need specialization? So I just published something recently on our blog about specialization in models. I did speak to a couple of people about why that's important.
Hmm.
I misunderstood the importance of that in the sense that like I thought it was more about like domain expertise, essentially taking a model and building it around a certain domain. But what I learned from speaking to some of these experts is that one of the key reasons why you want to separate training from actual, compute in the sense not compute, but the kind of the predictive model, the thinking model, the rationalization model from the training is that you can actually burn data really easily. I didn't understand this, but the current models, the current LLMs, can actually start to get recursive pretty quickly,
Mm.
and they start to burn the data in the sense that they use the data too frequently, and they actually start to create some kind of local medium or local maximum where they're incapable of thinking outside of the parameters that they've created for themselves. And so being able to separate the training data, you can then reset that and recreate that and allow yourself to rebuild your training data without breaking your predictive model. So again, I'm not quite as technical as I should be on this topic, and I'm trying to learn more. But I'm starting to see the value of having multiple models doing multiple things.
Wow,
It's like
I
having
love
different
that.
brains.
I love that. It's so interesting because one of the biggest challenges today, also when it comes to building agents or AI services, is that you
Hmm.
always constantly need to be evaluating everything that's being done. Because if not,
Hmm.
you're not going to be able to trust the output of the model. And so the tools that work really well are the ones that have this sort of scaffolding built around the experience, that's always testing, that's always double checking to ensure that
Hmm.
you can get the output that's there. But needless to say, I think the big takeaway here is OpenAI is taking the time to provide the tools and the services that they'll need to empower companies, because at the end of the day, as we said, it's going to be very expensive to build those models. And if they're not providing ways in which they can earn money, which means that they
Hmm.
need to solve the problems that their customers have, then it's not going to happen. So very excited and week for them. The other company that I just want to kind of slide in here is Microsoft, because this week Microsoft also had some big announcements. And again,
Right.
some of it flew under the radar, but they announced a brand new Copilot, a brand new personal Copilot. And what I loved about this rebranding is that they're focusing on Copilot to be very personal, very empathetic. And all of this is, you can tell it, Mustafa Suleiman that they acquired from Inflection. His
Hmm.
fingerprints are all over it, right? You can now talk to Copilot through WhatsApp. You can talk to it on the web. You
Hmm.
have the brand new interface, and of course the conversational side, just like we have with the new advanced conversations in ChatGPT. And so
Hmm.
you're seeing the personal side come forward from Microsoft, but also on the enterprise side, you're also seeing Copilot plus PCs that are getting a lot of new AI features, and it feels like a lot of what you'd have expected from Apple this time around with their new
Hmm.
device. But you have the new recall feature that can remember anything that you have done. They have given users control over what it can remember, etc. You have new image generation and design capabilities in Microsoft Paint. You have a universal search feature that has semantic search now over the entire operating system. And lots of other features. But the bottom line is this: if you're a Windows user, if you're in the Microsoft ecosystem, you're in Microsoft 365. Increasingly, I think Microsoft is making a very compelling argument that that should be the ecosystem that you stay in, that you build your business in, that you have your
Yeah,
personal content in. Because again, you spoke about data. If you have all of your data centralized that the AI now has access to, it becomes a lot more valuable. And that's going to be one
yeah,
of the challenges that Apple will need to solve as they look to bridge the gap between personal data and how people are using their computers for work.
yeah. Huge opportunities for companies who have structured data and an API or some way to share that with these models. So, Chris, let's get into the details here about enterprise use because I had several more conversations over the last couple of weeks with enterprise buyers and users, choosers and users, if you will, that have told me quite emphatically that their organizations are just not ready for AI. In other words, they have asked their software vendors, their SaaS vendors like Figma, like Microsoft, to turn off AI features because they are concerned about leakage, they're concerned about security, they're concerned about regulatory issues. So, can you give us a little more perspective on, let's say I'm a company and I've got 10,000 users and I'm on a Microsoft platform, that's what we use Office, and suddenly Copilot's rolled out. How do I make sure that this is a secure rollout? How do I make sure that I don't have leakage of IP, that we have a secure environment, that there's no cybersecurity risk there?
Sure. I love that question because I think it addresses a very real concern that we're seeing, obviously, in enterprise that a lot of people may not recognize. And there's a, an inherent danger to trying to police the usage of AI without any sort of direction given to your employees. Because the reality is this: when you look at the survey data, so many people are saying they're using generative AI. But when
Mm-hmm.
you look at when we talk to companies, when we look at the interview data from companies, companies are saying no, they're not adopting
Right.
AI as well. And so it becomes apparent that if you're not putting in processes to allow for people to use these tools, they're probably going to be using it anyways. And that is a big danger for enterprises because
Yeah.
now you'll have people using it without any sort of standard operating procedures, without the appropriate guardrails, and sharing company data maybe in models that don't have the security in terms of the data
Right.
protections that you might have with like Microsoft's enterprise offerings or their business offerings. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
when you use Microsoft 365 Copilot for business, those plans specifically don't allow for your data to be used for training. But if you're just using some of the consumer offerings without opting out, you're automatically going to be sharing that data to
Right.
be used for training in the future. And so I
Yeah.
think the first layer is one, be very honest about assessing people. I'm not making them feel as if, well, they absolutely cannot use AI. Find out why they're trying to use AI, how it's affecting their workflow. And if you see the need, ensure that you have rules and regulations in place that are clearly communicated as to how people can use it, when they can use it, and what the data privacy controls should be around that. But this needs to be something that enterprises get ahead of because on the personal level, people are seeing the value from AI tools. And so you need to start thinking about how this can be integrated within your enterprise operating procedures. But outside of that, Richard, what are you thinking when, based on the conversations that you're having? I know
Mm-hmm.
companies want to adopt AI, but they're fearful. They're fearful of the regulatory risks. Of course, we saw this week that the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, vetoed the AI safety bill. But this is just going to be the beginning of a very
Right.
long process around policy and regulation. What are you
Yeah.
hearing from companies when it comes to just why they're slowing down the rollout of these AI tools?
Yeah, the Newsom decision was actually interesting because really it reflects what enterprises are thinking. The Newsom decision was made based on the fact that there just isn't enough clarity, right? He
Mhm.
made that decision because he said, we haven't really thought this through yet. We're making some broad-based decisions on something that we don't really understand. Now, there
Yep.
might be some other political reasons behind that, but we're not going to speculate. From an enterprise point of view, there are probably two categories that are worth interesting looking at. One is not a new thing, and that is, self-service models like consumer models like ChatGPT. They're going to be used by individuals, and there's almost no way to stop that from happening. But there is a helpful way to see this. So what you could do is you can create a fence around some of these things and create experiments. So I've heard from a handful of C and V level executives that that's exactly what they're going to do.
Mhm.
They're going to take a small group of people or a particular group or division, and they're going to start using it. They're obviously going to have some SOPs, some ideas about how they might use it, but they're going to run experiments. They're just going to see how this tool changes the way that people are working. Does it change workflow? Does it change efficiency? Put some metrics in place in order to understand what that is. You know, some vanity metrics like adoption and usage, and then
Mhm.
some more detailed ones like, is this thing being reused on a regular basis? What's frequency of reuse? And then more details about what that's actually doing in order to deliver value for the organization. So experimental models, I think, are going to be, and when I mean model, I don't mean like the LLM. I mean, the model is like the way that you might do this, the
Yeah,
framework
the
in which you
operating
might do
model.
this, operating model. So that's the thing that I'm hearing from a lot of executives is we don't know enough. We're playing a little bit of a wait and see game. We anticipate that in order to find out for ourselves, we will have to run experiments. We can't wait for the market to tell us what to do. On the other hand, there's also this general idea that AI isn't a strategy and that it is really just a tool and it should be treated like every other tool. You wouldn't just insert a piece of software into your stack without deliberation and consideration. And that's what these companies are doing. They've taken a step back. The original hype is kind of like, okay, great. So we had an exciting year last year. We've had an exciting this year. We know what AI is now. We understand that it is a tool set. We understand that it's software, just like every other piece of software, and that we need to evaluate it accordingly. So I think there's a maturity developing in enterprise that
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
hearing more and more of. A year ago, 6 months ago, I was hearing executives talking about AI strategy as if that was going to be an answer to something. Clearly, it's not. This is just a tool set, lots of different options there. And then I
Well,
think the third thing to consider is really just a market level
mhm.
issue, and that is we are not seeing the level of adoption that either surveyed or what's the other data set like the anticipated use of AI would be. In fact, I heard from several enterprise leaders that they are just not using AI at all. And I think that means that if you are betting on something, if you're betting on infrastructure, if you're betting on any one of these AI companies, take a good hard look at that. You know, there is product market fit for sure. 100% there's good product market fit. But is the customer ready to make that purchase decision? And we need to see that through that lens of stark reality is that they're just not ready yet. So I think there's going to be a delay in the enterprise lift that a lot of these companies are seeking. And I think that's why when you look at OpenAI or some of these other companies, they are developing good developer tools. The APIs are good because they know that enterprises need to evaluate, they need to experiment, they need to understand these tools, they need to have them in an environment which they can put their constraints and protections around for those decisions to be made appropriately. So I think there's still going to be some more time. It's just a kind of a lag, if you will, between the hype of, hey, this is what this tool can do, this is the excitement of what we've created, versus yeah, we're actually using that every single day, and we've figured out how to make it fit with our security and with our regulations.
So I think you hit the nail on the head, Richard, but I want to add a different context. By the way, I'm
Mm,
going to make a note of Sora. Later in the
yes.
episode, I want to talk about the delay in releasing Sora. I have some thoughts on
Mm-hmm.
that. But I also think the reason why you're not seeing adoption is because designers fell asleep at the wheel. I think for the first year and a half in AI, a lot of designers kind of just were shell shocked. They may have stepped back and they were allowing engineering and the technical focus to lead the way. And so,
We know this story. This is the this
yeah,
is the
right.
movie we've seen before.
And so now you're starting to see where products have AI in them, but it doesn't feel intuitive. It doesn't work well with existing processes, or people just aren't using them because it wasn't built with users in mind, right? And
Yeah.
so I think what you're going to see with the next wave of AI products, where you have it centered around humans and users and solving their problems, I think that's when you're going to see this ramp up in adoption. Because I want to be clear, AI technology is a game changer. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
it's a technology like every other technology before it that will require adoption and will require tooling built around it. But the accelerant that it provides to everything is just
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous. And you're seeing this at the model provider level, meaning when you look at the new models that are coming out, they're being accelerated with AI. The data that they're being trained on is being accelerated with AI generated data. And so
Right.
even from a process standpoint, these AI companies they're eating their own, they're drinking their own Kool-Aid, and they're using AI to make their AI models more capable. And when
Yeah.
you look at what smaller companies are starting to do in terms of the output that they're able to achieve, the numbers speak for themselves. A
Right.
year ago, people were saying, no, they're not sure where AI will fit in coding, and if AI coding will be a thing. Well, you look
Yep.
at the landscape today and what you're seeing. The
Oh yeah.
majority of code that's being generated is AI generated from some of the largest companies. And so
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
an enterprise, the danger is not being scrappy enough, not being aggressive enough to say, hey, you know what, let's go out, let's experiment, let's try something, let's fail at it, but let's learn
Mm-hmm.
from it and quickly move forward. The
Totally.
strategy can't just be to let's sit back and wait and wait until this blows over. It's going to move so rapidly, it won't be possible to catch up. And the one thing I'll point to is this: look at Meta. Look at the growth that you have seen in Meta's Llama models, in their hardware that they're coming out with. Yes, it's from years of investment, but you're starting to see where open source just by being aggressively out there in the frontiers, you're catching up with some of these proprietary closed models. And I think that is the best example I could give to an enterprise company. Yes, you will need to move a little bit slower. But as you said, Richard, get smaller teams activated, get them excited, get them using the products, learn what works, learn what doesn't work. Because when it comes to then you building out your own solutions or figuring out how to make better decisions, you'll be able to move faster.
You came up with a really interesting framework called usage. We've spoken about it a few times on the show. I think we'll probably create some links to some information about that. But the usage framework is designed specifically for companies to think through this. How do you go from, hey, we want to use AI, but we're not quite sure how to, all the way through to an experimental level of implementation? So, those of you who are interested, reach out to us. We can help you implement that usage model in your organizations and we can workshop it with you as well.
Yes, in fact, Richard, thank you for bringing that up. I will be in Boston this week. I'll be talking at the
Mm-hmm.
Generative AI conference at the Intercontinental, and it's going to be a lot
Mm-hmm.
of excitement, a lot of fun. If you're in the Boston area, I would love to meet up. Richard and I will be there, so send us a message, send us a DM on social media. But when it comes to just being proactive about thinking through where AI sits in your organization and how you can adopt it. Definitely, usage has been shown to lead to a lot of success with companies, not because it gives you mechanics, but because it gives you the mindset that is needed to make that change within your organization. And so we're having a lot of fun working with companies to adopt AI, and we're seeing a lot of growth there. So looking forward to seeing you if you're
Yeah.
in Boston. But yes, lots of in-person events that are happening, and this is the
Yeah,
one that
let's
we're
talk about
having
that.
this week.
So, two big events that are happening in the Middle East. AI Everything Global is happening in the United Arab Emirates,
Mhm.
UAE, in Dubai. That's on the 4th, 5th, and 6th of February next year.
Mm.
Huge conference, incredible lineup of speakers. Wow, like mind blown. And then there's also another huge conference, also with a huge lineup of speakers called Leap.
Leap.
This is going
Yeah.
to, yep, Leap is going to happen on the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th of February. So if you're in the Middle East, you've got a lot of events to attend. This is going to happen in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. And then we're planning to be in the Middle East. We've got an option to speak in Bahrain in that period of time as well. So it looks like we're going to be out there. If people are listening to this and you're from that region and you're looking for somebody to host a workshop, do a keynote speak, or just do in a kind of an in-person working session with one of your teams, give us a ring because we'll be out there, or at least that's the plan for now,
Okay.
and we'd love to speak to you.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So let's switch gears, Richard. Let's talk a little bit about some new tools that came out this week that people are just going crazy over. Three tools that I'm going to highlight. The first is
Hmm.
called Flux. Flux 1.1 came out, and this is from a company, a startup called Black Forest Labs. And quick background about them, basically, some of the team members from Stability AI broke away
Hmm.
after the company kind of fell apart. And they started Black Forest Labs. And their model was adopted by Elon Musk. It was an open source model. It was adopted by Musk X.ai. So if you're using Grok,
Hmm.
you're generating images in Grok, you're using Flux on the back end. Now they've released Flux 1.1 Pro and
Hmm.
also an API. And an API basically will allow developers to, again, use the product to build this capability in their tools. And I stress that because the problem with a lot of companies like a Midjourney, sure, you can develop the products with Midjourney, but without an API, developers can't really take advantage of it in their tools, or you're using this capability in a tool that won't be allowed on their secure enterprise networks, and they want to build this feature for themselves. And so providing
Hmm.
an API is going to be critical if you're a model provider. And so it's super impressive to see that Black Forest has moved this quickly to release an API even before Midjourney. And a lot of people have been asking for that from Midjourney. But the quality of the images is just amazing. The speed at which you can generate images is great. If you want to check it out, I think Free Pick has a free offering for like 24 hours. Go try out
Hmm.
the model, have some fun with it. So that's the first thing. So
Can
again,
get up to a lot of mischief in 24 hours.
image generation for the win. Two video models came out this week that are
Hmm.
just amazing. The first is from Pika. Pika is a woman
We know them, yeah.
owned startup. I love the work that they have done, and the model creates super realistic videos. Check out their new model Pika 1.5. They have this thing called Pika Fix. And basically,
Mm.
it creates very realistic physics interactions with objects in your video. So you can take up an object, squeeze it, you can melt it, you can
Mm.
explode it. So some really
I
fun
want to do that, yeah.
interactions. You're seeing people use it online to do some fun things. But the big release, the big drop this week that came from a left field, by far is from Meta. Meta released
Hmm.
a tool called Movie Gen. Now, Movie Gen is great for a number of reasons, but the first one I'll highlight is that it doesn't just create silent videos. It actually has an
Hmm.
audio model associated with it that generates realistic audio based on what is in the video that's generated. It is unbelievable when you watch it and you hear it and you're like, all of this is coming from an AI. It's incredible. But beyond that, one of the things that Meta has been able to do is to allow you to personalize the video just with text. You can upload a picture of yourself and convert it into a video. Then you can make changes to your background. You can make changes to what you're wearing. It is super specific. And I think that is a little bit from their segment anything model and the experience that they have had with their previous models that they have been able to bring to MovieGen. But what I'll
Mm.
say is when you look at it, it's performing at the level of basically Kling 1.5, which hasn't been released fully yet, and Sora. And this is coming from Meta. And so it isn't available publicly. They're releasing it to only some select participants. But go to Maginative's website, check out the demo videos, check out the compilations that we have created. You're going to just really be amazed just looking at it.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier was that Sora obviously postponed their release. I think for political reasons, they wanted to make sure that it wasn't abused before the election period. Is that correct?
I thought that initially, Richard.
Mm.
I thought, well, maybe that was the reason why it was delayed because obviously the technology has been around for a while, and the quality
Mm.
that they were
And
putting
there
out.
are alternatives, right? It's not like
Exactly,
they're the only one
exactly.
out there. Mhm.
And then it occurred to me as I saw Movie Gen, I asked the question, who is going to be using this? What are they going to be using it for? And I think the reason why OpenAI hasn't released it, it got me thinking about Canvas, and it made me recognize that OpenAI isn't trying to build consumer tools. They're building tools that can generate money for them so that they can go
Mhm.
to AGI ultimately. And so
Right.
unlike like a runway where this is their product, where they're trying to get into the AI video generation business, OpenAI
Mhm.
has no such ambitions. And I think the reason why they haven't released it is simply because they haven't found a way to monetize it for consumers. When they see a way in which consumers will actively pay for this, where it's worth them maintaining this model for consumer use cases, I think they'll release it. But for the time being,
Yeah,
they were building this to really help their models understand the physics and the reality of the world, especially when it comes to
got it.
embodied AIs with robotics.
Mhm.
So they would probably rather use this technology internally to advance their models than to release an AI video generation model. And so
Interesting
that's my personal
perspective.
take. I think
Yeah.
once they figure out how to monetize it, they'll release it. They'll figure out ways in which they can leverage it. But of course, if they're releasing it, they're going to be releasing it with an API because that's the only way
Mm-hmm.
that companies are going to be able to utilize it.
Yep.
And of course, that will require a lot of security checks,
Back to the theme of the day, right?
exactly, exactly. So I think OpenAI is being very strategic. They're being very smart in terms of how they're moving forward. They're being very focused. AGI is their mission. Everything else is basically just a stepping stone to get there. And so
Yeah.
for companies, sure, you'll be able to build products that I think target a very niche audience. So if you're interested in building a video model, I'm sure you can do that with their technology and other technologies. But for OpenAI, I think it's very clear just based on their releases that they're being very focused on the fastest path to AGI.
Got it. Got it.
By the way,
So it seems like this is almost like an Amazon type strategy. It's like let's just build this thing, just keep investing in it, building it
exactly.
as big as possible. Yeah.
Exactly. And by the way, I said it this week on X. I was saying the AGI feels strong in this one because for the first time using ChatGPT, it didn't feel like a chatbot anymore. It didn't feel like,
Mm,
it didn't feel like the old Siris and Alexas of the world. It really felt like something different. And I think that back and forth interaction, especially when you use advanced conversation mode, I don't know if you have tried it. If you're listening to
no,
this
I
and
have
you
not
haven't
tried it.
tried it, more to try. It blows everything else out of the water in terms of interaction with the model, and it really gives you an appreciation as to what communication with intelligent machines could look like in the future.
Hmm. Do you have any other updates to make? Because we've also got to talk about our event that's coming up.
Sure. I think the only two things that I wanted to mention, if you're looking at models, Liquid, if you're an enterprise looking at
Right.
alternatives to the transformer architecture, Liquid
Hmm.
released their first set of models, their foundation models that they say outperform a lot of the transformer based models in many different ways. You also started to see the rollout of the memory features in Meta's Ray-Ban smart glasses. So lots of
Mm,
fun hardware announcements, lots of new model updates that businesses may want to keep an eye on. But you're right. The big thing that we want to just kind of wrap up with is our very first in-person event. Richard, I can't tell you how many people have asked me
crazy.
about this, how excited I am about it. I'm
Yeah.
going to give the floor to you. Tell everyone what we're planning, what they can expect in terms of the experience, and why we decided to offer this.
Yeah. Probably the most important reason why we wanted to do this is because we have acknowledged both for ourselves and for the people that we work with that time together, face to face, is incredibly important for transformational breakthroughs. What do we mean by that? It's information, we have different perspectives, we have strong opinions on things, but we're not in conversation with our customers, right? We're sharing, it's kind of a one to many
Yeah.
type model. We've noticed that when we go to events, when we have workshops, the level of conversation it goes to another level. I mean, it really it's a quantum leap.
Yep.
And what we wanted to do is two things. One is create a physical environment in which people felt like they were capable of transformation. And then secondly, we wanted to put a group of people together where it was possible to bring your full self, not just your, AI interests, but what are your interests in growing as a human being? What are your interests as expanding your understanding? What are the mental models that you're using to make better choices, better decisions? How are you going to interact between that virtual world and the world that you're firmly set in, this 3D world that we live in? And so those two things have encouraged us to create an event which we're going to be hosting in the Austrian Alps in June next year. This location that we've scouted is just out of this world. It is
Wow.
a several 100-year-old farm that has been lovingly renovated by its owners, Bernard and Kat. They have spent 3 years renovating this place.
Yeah.
It is extraordinary. Just the physical location. If you go to the website, click on the big banner at the top, you'll see the place of clarity, of transformation, of rest. And that's really what we want from a physical point of view, that's what we wanted to do.
Yep.
We're bringing in chefs. These chefs will be able to, both amaze you with their ability to get into the forest, take you into the forest, forage, potentially even hunt for dinner, prepare it for us. We've got classic cars. Just 7 minutes down the road, we've got a hotel, which is essentially a Porsche museum, but a classic car museum. And these cars and the motorcycles are available to use. We've got paragliding, we've got hikes, we've got riding, we've got all kinds of transformational physical opportunities. Get out there, get out of your comfort zone, take yourself to a new location. And then we've got workshop material that's going to not just focus entirely on AI, it's going to focus on thinking, on getting you to the next appropriate level for wherever you need to be. We're also going to have a tight group of well-curated individuals there, peers that are making the same kind of decisions that you are. They're in transformational states. They're trying to manage their lives and their businesses in ways that bring them to that appropriate next level. And so we're going to have a facilitation of events that is going to encourage you to be a little bit more vulnerable than you might be in your normal situation. You're going to be able to find secure, safe places to have great conversations, dig deep, share with these peers the things that you may not be able to share with your partner or your employees or the people around you in your teams. This is a place where you can really open up and say, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. This is what I'm going to be doing. And I need the tools to be able to get there. So that's a description of what we're doing. Like I said, it's going to be in probably one of the most beautiful places that I've ever seen. I am very selfishly going to be going there with my girlfriend in December this year to check the place out. We're going to be staying there. Bernard has actually suggested that we may end up having the place to ourselves because they don't have anything else booked that week that we're going to be there. So we're going to really dive deep into the mechanics of this location and find out exactly what we can do. So tune in for more updates on that, more pictures, more videos, more descriptions of what we'll be doing. And of course, we anticipate doing this more than once. So if you can't make it in June, let us know when you can make it. Just reach out and say, hey, look, it'd be awesome if you could do this in another time of the year. And we'll start to take those applications. That actually brings me to another point. You will be applying for a position and we will be interviewing you to make sure that this is a good fit with the rest of the group of people that are going to be there. That's part of the experience, is that this is not just a free-for-all. It's not like a summit or a conference where you just buy a ticket. This is going to be a highly curated thing. So put in your application, get on the phone with us, have a conversation about what it is that you want to do. And we will make sure that even if you can't make it, this will be an event for you to think about, maybe attending at another time when it's more appropriate for you. But yeah, I'm a little bit giddy about this, to be honest. Like I can't stop thinking.
Wow, thank you, Richard. And what I love about our approach is, in the middle and amidst all of this talk about AI, this is a very deeply human experience.
Right.
It's going to be about connection, connecting with others, connecting with yourself. Of course, embracing change in the wake of technology that is happening. And so I'm super excited also. I can't wait. I'm looking forward to sharing and meeting everyone that's there. As Richard said, hop on over to the website, check it out, apply, or just contact us. Let us know what you're thinking. We are going to be looking as to when we can schedule the next one. With that, Richard, anything else that we need to say to wrap up this week?
Oh my goodness. I had a lot of conversations with people that are at that intersection between hardware and software. I'm fascinated by this right now. I feel like that's a space that is just ready for people to dive into. Stop going onto LinkedIn and looking for jobs in SaaS. Get into this hardware software space.
Yeah.
If you're a software person, figure out how to get into the hardware space or the firmware space. If you're in the hardware space, try to get into the software space and bridge that gap, in the sense that if you understand how to bring the physical objects that we are building whether it be a rocket ship or just a device that you hold in your hand, there has to be an interaction between hardware and software. And AI is more and more important every single day. We spoke about this when we talked about the role of AI in defense and civil defense and drones, in diving really deeply into that. The world does not exist without us figuring out how to use the hardware software interface to protect ourselves, to bring safety to the people of this planet, and to solve big problems like climate change. Spending time at Taurus, spending time with some of these really big, innovative companies and seeing how they're bringing hardware and software together just makes me feel like this is the next frontier for technologists. Figure out how to get that way, that bridge built between those two worlds, because that is where it's happening. Actually, meeting with some people in the robotic space, the Boston Dynamics people who've got a new business,
Mhm.
meeting with them soon. Yeah, so that's really on my mind right now. And then, of course, I'll be in Europe next week. I'm going to be in London, Amsterdam, and Bruges in Belgium. And so I won't be on the podcast, but I will be bringing some news back from that uh, those regions.
Can't wait. Thank you. It's so inspiring hearing what you're talking about. And I do think if you're listening to this podcast, now is the moment. We have tools that are making knowledge more accessible, even if it's something that you have just been passionate about in the past where you weren't really sure how you could get it done. Dip a toe in, start asking questions. You may just surprise yourself. You may start going down a rabbit hole that you realize that you're really loving, and you want to continue to pull on that string. But as always, thank you for joining us. We love sharing with you each week, but we also love hearing back from you. So keep the feedback coming. But until next week, have a great weekend. One love.
One love.